bringing you a Sophianic broadcast featuring visionary teacher John Lamb Lash. Today is the 21st of July 2018. Welcome back to Radio Ginny. This is a special broadcast for a special occasion. John, you want to talk about how your version of Gnosticism appeals to people.
Yeah, this thought came up for me over the past few days. And it's a way of explaining my view of my own work, if that might be interesting to some people. But it's also a way of expressing my gratitude and recognition for those people who have embraced the Sophianic narrative, planetary tantra, and particularly who recognize that in my spin on Gnosticism, there is something that appeals to them. So I would like to go over what I think that might be.
But your particular spin on Gnosticism comes from a mystic's point of view, a self-taught man's point of view, somebody that's gathered clues for 40 years.
Well, certainly, but not entirely. I can say with some pride that I think I have struck a very fine balance between what comes out of my mystical experience, which is obviously idiosyncratic and subjective, and what comes from my solid scholarly foundation in the Gnostic materials, such as they are, such as they survive. I've always strived to strike that balance, and I'm very proud to say I think that I've kept that balance, and I'll comment on that as we proceed here.
Well, as the person that hand catalogued every single book in your personal library, which it's always being added to, so I've lost track of how many, but I'm gonna suggest around 6,000-ish mark, and there's many pencil-written notes within the books, post-its everywhere, some of which you've read many times, some of which you've read once. So I can attest to the fact that, you know, your self-scholarship is true.
Thank you. And it's my wish and my highest desire that before too long that material will be available to people out in the open. The library will be there for people to come and research using your catalog to search as a database. And if that happens, the people who come will find that I have a really substantial library on Gnosticism, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the pagan mysteries, all of it. And I believe that I have the best books. And I also spent 3 months at a place in Leuven, Belgium, where I hobnobbed a little bit with the world-class scholars in both Gnostic writings and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I have examined the microfiches of the Nag Hammadi writings with the Dead Sea scholar, with a Gnostic scholar. So I really put in the groundwork, and I think that those people today who are able to recognize the authenticity of my scholarship come to it with a really good attitude, and that's one of the things that appeals to them. I am a genuine Gnostic scholar in my own right. And I'm saying something about Gnosticism that no one else is saying.
Well, you're not a Christian or a Judaic scholar for a start off, are you?
That's right. I represent the underdog and the cast-off and the defamed.
You're the maverick.
I'm the maverick, and the Gnostics themselves were mavericks and rebels. And they were against the culture of their time. So with that beginning, can I say I've got like 6 points here that I would say belong to the constellation of my work, and they would explain what appeal it has as distinct from other versions of Gnosticism.
Okay, I just want to add that there's myself, Ginny, and Quickie Claus in the recording studio as well. So we'll interject with questions and comments as you go.
Super. Okay. So I'll start by saying that it's very obvious that the goddess factor shines and radiates through my Gnostic work. I got a message in 2008 when I got to Terma, how I should behave, how I should proceed with my teaching career. And it came to me in this beautiful little phrase, well, John, it's for you to teach and for her to reach. And she does indeed reach people. And so I know that in my version of Gnosticism, where the Aeon Sophia stands as the central character and the sacred narrative of the mysteries stands as the centerpiece of the whole work, that reaches people. And it reaches them really powerfully. And of course, no other exposition of Gnosticism comes close to that. As MC Hammer said, well,
you can't touch this.
Can't touch this.
Well, I mean, this is something that we learn all the time and have learnt for a long time, is that it either reaches you and touches the very fabric of your being, or it leaves, or it does nothing.
Yeah. The Grail selects its own.
Yeah.
I have no argument with people who are not touched by the Sophianic narrative. But I do know in my heart of hearts, and I know in every grain of genuine scholarship that I've achieved in my life, that the longing to recognize and embrace the planetary mother is inherent to the Rome. It's inherent to all indigenous religions. It's inherent to the true core of all major genuine religious teachings, such as Hinduism, where you see the goddess figure. Even Buddhism, you see the goddess figure. Who is this goddess? It's your mother. It's the aeonic divinity who designed you. It's the immanent divinity of the earth. And many people today, thank goddess for the fact that many people today still long for her. And when they come into my presentation of Gnosticism, they find her. So that is absolutely the most outstanding appeal that it has.
Absolutely. And I think, I've got into many commentary debates, for want of a better word, about people who attack your take on Gnosticism. And it's like you've always said, the Jewish and the Christian scholars couldn't understand 25% of the Nag Hammadi material because they weren't open to it, and they didn't know it was too woo-woo.
It crossed the genre is the best way to explain it.
Yeah, so if you want to learn golf, you'd expect to read a book
by someone who's an expert on golf, right?
A golf pro,
right?
They weren't in the position to write about that material, so they excluded it.
Well, there are two deterrents here. I'm glad you point this out. One deterrent is that gnosis is cognitive ecstasy. So when I give Gnostic intel to the public through my teachings and writings, I am speaking to some degree from what I have learned in a state of cognitive ecstasy. And the state of cognitive ecstasy is something that you have to know how to handle, because it's a tremendous rush of awe, of beauty, of lucidity, and it's a technique of knowing, a unique technique of knowing. Well, the Gnostic scholars who are Judaic Christian tradition have never been there. They've never gone there. They are not mystics. They do not practice experimental mysticism. They do not play golf. How can they possibly write a book on golf?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. They're not disposed to.
They're not disposed
Thank
to
you.
that.
That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, they don't have that disposition. That's right. So that's a really important point. So the other deterrent is that 25%, I estimate, of the Gnostic material concerns the problem of the archons.
Okay.
Now, anyone who follows the narrative knows how crucial this is. One of the things that in planetary tantra that no one else on the planet knows, there's no other source of this, is that the Aeonic Mother herself created the archons.
By accident.
By accident. Now, this is a tremendous piece of intel.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
And it's hard to take. I realize that. It's not easy to take at the beginning. But when you take it on board, you stay in the narrative, you develop your understanding within the frame of the narrative, then it makes sense. So it's like the Jewish critic in the LA Times who reviewed Not in His Image on my birthday, the year it came out. Jonathan Kirsch actually had remarkable praise for the book. He pointed out that Lash claims that he was going to fulfill the mission of Nietzsche and entirely take Christianity down. And he says he pretty much did so. I mean, I thought that was quite, a compliment coming from you-know-who. But when it came to the Archon material and the link between the Archon material and the ET UFO phenomena, he said, well, that goes too far. The author went too far. Well, that's exactly the problem with the conventional scholars like Elaine Pagels. Elaine Pagels brought Gnosticism into the mainstream with her book, The Gnostic Gospels. You look in the in-text, and Archon is not even listed. Why? Because in the perception of Elaine Pagels, even though the surviving Gnostic materials are saturated with Archon references, it goes into the realm of parapsychology, it goes into the realm of the paranormal, into the realm of the weird and the fringe, and she won't go there. So due to that genre problem, that scholars won't go there, they eliminate an enormous part of the Gnostic message. But I, in turn, bring that to the forefront. And I think that really appeals to people.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that they won't go there; it's that they can't go there.
They can't
because of their Abrahamic mind virus.
Yeah,
it won't allow them to go there
because the parasite hides itself. And every time you point to the Archon, it's like pointing to the you-know-who, because the Gnostics warn us that the Archons.
So going back to your library. The last part of your library that I catalogued was the ufology stuff, and
you were floored.
I was floored because there was approximately 130 books in that, and he'd read every single one of them because the post-its were there, the little pencil-written hand notes. And I've said to you before, well, how long did you? It must have been a really difficult decision for you to go forth and public with this Archon material, because it's a risk to take, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a big risk, and I talked about that risk to some people at the time. When I founded metahistory.org, in fact, I said, well, look, I'm going to bring out the restoration of the total Sophianic narrative, including the Archon passages, because they're crucial. And they said, wow, that's a risk. And I said, yeah, it's a risk that I have to take. And that was actually when I studied those 130 books, I studied the UFO phenomena in depth, gave me the confidence to make that step. And that was a large factor in compelling me to write the book, actually.
Mm. And of course you wrote Not in His Image before you knew about the JQ. It was completely innocent goy. And yet your
My instincts knew about the JQ, but I didn't have the awareness of it that I have today, or the language to talk about it in the way that I do today.
So, of course, there were references to evil Germans, Nazis.
Slight, right. But my instincts held me steady on that until such time as I learned more and became informed and enlightened on the JQ.
And out of those 130 ufology books, many of them are written by the Xenosh. You told me how many you thought were worthy of reading.
Well, you read John Keel, Operation Trojan Horse, and you read all of Jacques Lavallee. Absolutely brilliant. And I could mention maybe a couple of others that slip my mind right now. But that's the extent of the distillation process I had to go through. I could say that there are 4 or 5 out of 130 books that were useful. But I did benefit from reading all those accounts, and I was able to draw a conclusion which I stand by. The Gnostic materials tell us that the Archons have certain abilities. They describe the MO, how they operate, how they infringe and impinge upon and intrude upon this experiment, and one of them is how. virtual reality. So I came to understand that to the extent that UFO abductions are genuine, and many of them aren't, many of them are just screens for MK Ultra type experimentation. But to the extent that they are genuine, they are instances in which, due to the psychic and emotional weakness of a person, generally someone who has probably sexual problems, psychic, emotional boundaries are weak, the archons are able to create a virtual reality experience for that person. They're not really abducted, but in virtual reality they are really abducted. And I was able to say that with confidence, and I hold by that statement. So let's go on to second point. Second point is a really tricky point, and I don't want to take too much time on it. It has to do with the struggle that I had to address the straw man argument about the Gnostics. Okay? So I'm going to use a word which is patristic. Scholars like Elaine Pagels use this word patristic, Patristic, which refers to the fathers. Well, who are these fathers? They are the early church fathers, the first ideologues of the Judeo-Christian salvationist agenda.
Peter, for example.
Yeah, Peter, the apostles are, Paul is, but also the commentators like Irenaeus, Epiphanius, Tertullian, Origen to some extent. They are early Christian ideologues who attacked the Gnostics.
And we've learned recently that Judeo-Christian is a very recent term that's been bandied around.
Yes, it is.
So it's not necessarily accurate.
No, not accurate. But they were coming from an archontic agenda, these Christian ideologues. And so you have what is called the patristic writings. And I call that the case for the prosecution against the Gnostics. So there was a case against the Gnostics. So they come in and the lawyers for the prosecution present their case. And this is found in the patristic writings. And one of the outstanding element of the patristic writings is that they give you a straw man version of what Gnostics believed. And I think everyone listening to me knows what a straw man is.
Explain, in case somebody doesn't.
If you and I are having an argument, Ginny, and I want to defeat you dishonestly and disingenuously, I don't respond with semantic honesty, taking your argument on your terms. I distort your argument into false terms, which is a straw man, and then I knock down the straw man and pretend that I'm knocking down your argument. This is done in order to avoid refuting good arguments. So the Gnostics had some really damn good arguments against Judaism, Yahweh, Christianity, salvationism, the divinity of Christ, the resurrection of the body.
And it would have been Islam had they been able to
and
survive
Islam
long
as
enough.
well, but they were before Islam. And because the patristic ideologues were not able to refute the truth in the Gnostic arguments, they created a straw man, and then they refuted that. Okay? So what is the straw man? What is the patristic straw man? It is basically the portrait of Gnostics that goes like this. The Gnostics believed that the material and sensory world in which we're sitting right now was created by the demiurge, was an evil entity, and that therefore they condemned and rejected the material world, and that Gnosticism is based on a dualism of matter, spirit, good, evil.
So this is the matrix that people like Ike talk about.
That's right. That's right. That argument, that portrayal of what Gnostics believed is absolutely untrue. But many, many people buy it today. And so getting back to why I think my spin on Gnosticism appeals to people goes to this point. Those who cannot get past the straw man and who accept that version will not like my work. But those who can look past the straw man and see the tactic of deceit are immensely relieved, because then they are brought to the true message of Gnosticism, and they do not get trapped in the straw man argument.
And the Christian Judaic interpretations of Gnosticism.
Right. And I think on this point, before I move on, it would be appropriate to do a little arrogation to my friend and colleague, Graham Hancock. Now, Graham Hancock read Not in His Image, and he supplied a blurb for it. I don't know if he actually read it or not, because I destroy this straw man argument in Not in His Image. And not only do I destroy it, but I reconstruct the beautiful visionary wisdom of the Gnostics centered on the goddess figure. No, the material world is not a matrix. No, you are not divine sparks trapped in the dark world of matter. No, this world is not ruled by the evil demiurge as his creation. This world is the embodiment of the divine Sophia herself. That's the difference. Well, but Graham Hancock, who's read my book, continues to speak about Gnosticism, not even mentioning me, and perpetrating the patristic straw man, which I find really deplorable. I mean, the least he could do would say, I happen to have read John Lash's work, and I know that John, his spin on Gnosticism is different, but I maintain this. That's the very least he could do. He never does that. So I consider that to be dishonest and deplorable.
Yes.
Okay.
Ike's the same.
Ike is the same. Everybody's the same.
We know that David Icke has read Not in His Image as well.
Right.
I have a personal anecdote about Ike reading Not in His Image.
And someone seeing the book on his desk.
No. Somebody met him and they had a copy of Not in His Image, and he put his bony finger on it and said, that's a really important book, and yet he never cites you. One of his talks, he's repeating you verbatim,
right,
and he never ever cites you.
That's right.
And you've said before, if people are talking about the Archons and they're not talking about it within the fallen goddess scenario, then
don't trust them.
Don't trust them.
Just a word on Ike. I would say this about people who have seen his discourses drawing on the Nag Hammadi materials. Ike typically says, the Gnostics said this. Mm. No, they didn't. I said that. Mm. I said that based on my research into what the Gnostics believed. So he actually cites what I said, but he says the Gnostics said it. But if you go and look in the Gnostic material, you won't find in many cases that they said that. You'll find that it's I who said that. Mm-hmm. So I warn people about that. So anyway, back to quickly 4 more points that I think are really appealing in my spin on Gnosticism. One is that I say I'm the Gnostic teacher living today. So we know that Gnosticism was a movement of the past, and in a respect it's dead and over. I'm not trying to revive the Gnostic religion, in quotes. What I'm saying is Gnosticism can never be dead.
Well, as long as you're living on the planet.
As long as you're living on the planet, you have your mind and your senses, you can connect with the divine presence of the planet, and you can use the faculties she endowed in you, then you are Gnosis alive today. Mm. And Gnosis is alive today. And I think that's something that appeals to people. Not only that I present myself as the living embodiment of it, but I say, this is an open source system, and you can be a Gnostic as well.
Well, this is the Maitreya process, isn't
right.
it?
That goes through the Maitreya process. Right. So I think that's quite appealing, and I think that, again, there's a selection process involved here. Undoubtedly, we talk about it a lot. Yep. There's a self-selection, and as Crooked Claw mentioned the other day, there's a self-deletion. There's a self...
Deselection.
Yeah, self-deselection. My pretense is a test. The Grail selects its own. If you can accept my pretense that I'm a Gnostic teacher who embodies that method, then you deselect yourself out of the story. Not because of me, but because you can't accept the living presence of Gnosis itself.
And people get deselected in your personal reality.
They do indeed.
Because they can't stay in the narrative.
No, they can't stay in the narrative.
They say they're in the narrative, but they don't live and embody the narrative.
Because it hasn't really reached them in their heart, and they're too damaged, whatever reason.
Or they're a narcissist living in the ego.
Indeed.
Yeah. Or they're pretending.
Or they're caught in the game of pretending. So, 3 more points very quickly. I think that my emphasis on novelty and innovation in the frame of Gnosis today really appeals to people. You know, they like that idea. It's tantalizing. Not true novelty is always attractive, and as I point out, the concept of novelty goes back to the very core of the sacred narrative, because of the word found in the Greek Coptic materials, monogenes. So when you go to the Judeo-Christian scholars, they refer to the Bible, they refer to St. Paul, and they translate monogenes as only begotten.
Only begotten son.
Only begotten son. So monogenes, mono, only, singular, genes, begotten. So they go right back into Christian theology of salvationism and divine atonement through the sacrifice of the Son, which comes from, do you know who, right?
Do you know?
Yeah. Do you know?
Do you know?
Do you know? Do you know who that is? And I say, no. We're not going to rehab in a salvationist gulag. No. We're going to singularity. That is the way you translate monogenes. Monogenes. Single generating. Monogenes. Couldn't be any better. It's a literal interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So, people love this. And I say, who's the singularity? You are the singularity. You and I in this room. Everyone who hears this, everyone who is roommate, is the singularity in this divine experiment. So I think that's really appealing to people.
Yes.
Final 2 points. I've come out through the trajectory of the last couple of years. You know, that familiar trajectory. Reset ended in March of 2014. I sort of paddled along. What was it? A dog paddle in white water?
Yes.
Remember that image? I was like a dog paddling in white water going down the rapids, trying to find my bearings. Then I picked up on the Mandela effect, did the Mandela effect investigation. Then we segued into the Charlotte working. You know, and all of this, I've come forth, or what has come forth through all of that is autogenic training, autogenic practice.
Autogenic magic.
Autogenic magic. Interactive magic with Gaia.
Experimental, interactive magic with Gaia.
The power of the earth. The power of the living earth mother. So actually you can say this is a gem. And it is a gem actually. I'll tell you what gem it is. You know, I steal a lot of things and hijack a lot of things from Tibetan Buddhism. One of my favorite hobbies, as you know. I go and raid them. I go over to their camp over
like
here.
a thief in the night.
Like a thief in the night. I go to their camp in the valley across the mountain, and I raid all these Tibetan Buddhist sacred relics, and I come back, and I work them over, and I say, okay, this is a tool of planetary tantra, and it beats anything you can find in Tibetan Buddhism, hands down. So there is a theme in Tibetan Buddhism. It's called the Chintamani, which means the 5-faceted gem. Okay, mani is a pearl. Om mani padme hum. The jewel is in the lotus. The pearl is in the lotus. So the Chintamani is the 5-faceted jewel. And that is said to be a very high gift of some, woo-woo, wah-wah, metaphysical level. No one ever gets there. But it's sort of this trophy, like the World Cup trophy that you finally achieve if you reach the highest level of Tibetan Buddhism. Autogenics is the Chintamani. It is the wish-fulfilling gem.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that appealed to me about your work is that I spent 20-something years searching yogic philosophy, a bit of Tibetan Buddhism, here and there, Hinduism, all those things that were non-Christian, Judaic, and you streamline people to the pearls of all that shit.
That's right. I have a special privilege which was granted to me. You know that story.
Yes.
I had once a half-hour, audience with a high Nyingma Lama.
And you both didn't say anything. You told him a joke,
Yeah,
and then apart from that,
joke.
you didn't say anything. You just watched the clouds going by.
Yeah,
the same
him a
cloud.
joke. I asked him a riddle. If a fool and a wise man have a conversation, who learns the most? And he looked at me and he kind of nodded and chuckled.
It's a good pickup line, by the way. It's worked for some people.
Yeah, it's a very good line. And then he sort of turned his head and he looked at this window. It was in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, with the clouds rolling by. We both sat there for 25 minutes just looking at the clouds go by.
And it was the same cloud that kept going by, wasn't it?
The same cloud kept going by over and over again. Like a painted cloud. It was like we were in a stupa. And the stupa is painted with these iconic conventions. The clouds are always painted in the same way in a Buddhist. We're in the stupa, and the stupa is slowly turning. And we're like gaping at these clouds. I am sure I was given everything in the kit and caboodle of Nyingma was put in my lap because I asked him that riddle. That was a great moment.
Yeah.
So, autogenics, magic, and finally, it would be incomplete to exclude the Grail. The Grail is an accessory. It's not an accessory. It's an essential part of the Gnostic teaching. And I think that, as far as I know, I'm really proud of the alternative history of the Grail. Nemata Terma Publishing will bring it out as a book in 2 volumes. It's absolutely outstanding work that will last to the end of the Kalpa. And not only does it fill in a deep historical vein which has been missing, but it does something else as well. What is that deep historical vein? Well, it's the story of the diaspora of the mysteries.
Which actually Hitler picked up.
Which actually Hitler and indeed he did. In fact, they had that thread. They had the Grail warrior Parsifal thread, which was one of the elements that inspired National Socialism and that inspired the unparalleled heroism of the German people that came through the recovery of the warrior spirit through the Grail legend.
Wagner.
Through Wagner, so the Grail element is another factor in my message that appeals to people. But you would ask, how does the Grail relate to Gnosticism? Well, because, very simply, the quest for the Holy Grail is a quest to encounter the organic light of the wisdom goddess. And Gnosticism was based on that encounter.
You've just been investigating a man in America that he's a Nord mythology expert, and it came up, didn't it?
Yes, it did, to my delight. I've been watching this dude in Colorado.
He's gorgeous.
He's a really handsome dude.
You've got a boy crush, and I've got a girl crush.
I do. The girls are going to fall for this guy. I can't remember, is his first name Jackson or his last name? I think Jackson is his first name.
We'll put a link. Yeah.
So I've always been fascinated by the Old Norse language and the Icelandic Eddas, the Kalevala, and so forth and so on. And he's a teacher of Old Norse. So I finally get a chance to hear Old Norse. And so he was commenting on I believe it's called the Grimnismal, which is a set of runes describing the initiation of Odin. And he's reading the runes, he's pronouncing the Old Norse language. I eat this stuff with both hands. I'm eating this stuff up. And there was a passage in which he mentions that a drop in temperature, which is always signifies that you are coming into the presence of the organic light. You feel the temperature drop. How many times have we had this verified?
Every time.
Yeah.
You see your breath.
If you really go deep, you see a breath.
Yeah.
First, you just notice that it's cooler. If you go into what I call 5 below chambers, you are in the organic light and you can see your breath. But that doesn't fit what's happening in the actual atmosphere. It's not below zero.
No.
Right? So anyway, in this passage that he's reading, it describes that Odin is in a state of ecstatic trance, and the temperature drops, and he's there with this unknown goddess named Saga.
Saga.
We love this. Saga Norden, right? He's there with Saga, and they are drinking elixir from golden chalices. Well, this is a metaphor for the encounter with the organic light.
Of course, this man doesn't know this.
He doesn't know this, no. So I was delighted that came up. So to conclude on the note of the Grail, it's as simple as this. Through my spin on Gnosticism, I show that there is one and one only true description of the attainment of the Holy Grail, which is that it is the direct encounter with the organic light. And I also show, and not in his image, by extensive citing of pagan materials, that this was called the light of instruction. And that those initiates who encountered this light in their mystery cells received instruction from the goddess, and therefore they were able to be the teachers and guides of humanity, the true teachers and guides, and those who we can still follow today by recovering and practicing the Gnostic method.
Would you like to say something about people want to encounter the light, that find your work, that of course they want to encounter the light. Would you like to add something to that?
Yes, I would. There is something called holistic shamanism, and you can learn all about it on Nematta, and it's the part that's free. Planetary Tantra is free on Nematta. It's
which
an
is
open
material,
campus.
which is material that you haven't released before.
Some of it I haven't, that's right. Significant things I haven't released. So Nematta is going to be a campus where you can be a member and join, or you can enroll in certain courses at a small cost, or you can wander around the campus and benefit from it. There's a free area of the campus. Holistic shamanism is that kind of shamanism that can be practiced today by the use of psychoactive plants rigorously, soberly, to go to the organic light and to encounter the organic light and to repeat the experiences that the Gnostics had, but to go even better, because it's even better today. So, of course, when many people hear my descriptions of the organic light, which I've written extensively in Severed Rose and elsewhere, who would not want to have that experience?
Of course, people want to meet their maker.
They do. They want to be in ecstatic melt in ecstasy in front of that. It's the most beautiful thing that you can ever see. It is beauty. It is the ultimate beauty. It's this light. And of course people want to see it. So I realized that when I broke the vow of silence and described the light, that I set up a situation which was kind of tricky. I don't want to lead people to crave for something that they can't get. I don't want to place myself in the position of some ultimate privilege. Well, I saw it and you didn't. There were problems. But the goddess herself has a solution to those problems. And let me give you just a little, in a closing note, let me give you just a little glimpse of what that is. Whenever you think about the Ionic Mother, or the Answer Fire, always think of yourself as a child and think, as any child would, well, what are my mother's wishes? Not for me, but for herself as well. She's not just there to be my mother, she's there to be herself. So what are her wishes regarding the possibility in our time that people can encounter the organic light? Well, her wish is that those who have not yet encountered it would come to know that there is an equivalent experience they can have without encountering it. And that is the experience of knowing that they are characters living in her lucid dream. But in order for you to know that, you must draw a precise Gnostic nuance. And this is the nuance. She's lucid in her dream, and you are too. But what is your lucidity? Your lucidity is the very consciousness that you give to listen to my words. If you can realize that and hold on to that, she will bring you to the same beauty and ecstasy of the light as she does to those who encounter it directly. Never said that before, did I?
No.
That's good.
So, have we covered it?
Yes, I think so.
Covered it quite well.
So until the next time.
How do we sign off on Guy Named Radio?
I can't remember, it's been so long.
You had a good sign off.
Yeah, something like, until the next time...
Be real.
No, keep it real.
Yeah. Keep it real.
Just
something
keep
like
it
that.
real.
Yeah, right. Keep the dream real. Stay in the dream and keep it real.
No, that wasn't it, but
Okay.
that will do.
That'll do.